Good morning, everybody. This is Diggs. It's another beautiful day out here in the Pacific Northwest, and today we're going to be talking about 4-star plus familiars for Familiar Arena. We're going to be talking about how they kind of rank and how they're going to rank going into the future. We're also going to talk about how they rank right now in the global community, because we have a lot of situations where, for example, Molten Lion, who may not be ranked the highest in a couple of months, is going to be ranked really high right now because a lot of players that pulled Molten Lion invested their resources into him. So there's kind of an uneven playing field right now between players who have invested in specific familiars and familiars that are going to be good in the future that players may not have invested in because they are not necessarily the best for PvE. So we're going to talk about these different situations, and we're going to talk about what this is going to look like for Legendary Plus familiars going into the future. We are not going to be talking about the PvP familiars because I don't think any of them are really going to show up anytime soon in PvP or in Familiar Arena, and they are not necessarily the most impactful on the meta on the Korean side. So let's go ahead and dig in. So the first familiar we're going to be talking about is going to be Staghorn. Now, Staghorn is on the current banner, and Staghorn is interesting because for a long time, the meta is going to be Suryu and Hippocampus, and Staghorn does offer a potential solution to counter the water elements because he is Earth. However, he is a tank, and his ability is a very long cast time. The ranged aspect of his attacks as well are not cross-map, so you will run into situations where Staghorn does move and change position, and since his ability is based off the furthest familiar to him, you could end up casting his ability on a familiar that you were not planning to. So Staghorn is pretty good, but I think a lot of people that pulled Staghorn didn't invest a ton of resources in him, as opposed to, say, Molten Lion or Hippocampus, right? I think he is also a little bit unpredictable. He's going to take a very high skill player in order to pull off. I also think a lot of our formations right now on the global side don't necessarily favor disruption. I think a lot of people, for example, run Ebony Torex. They don't really understand, though, how he is disrupting the enemy's formation. I don't think there is even standard formations yet on the global side, whereas if you look at the Korean side, there is very standard formations, right? And they even have names for them. They have them like standard formation. They have knife formation, right? And a lot of the times it's based off the quantity of tanks and the quantity of attack-based familiars or ranged/auxiliary-based familiars. So Staghorn is going to be a unit that is probably going to be better in the future when we do have specific formation-based strategies where he is going to be able to be maybe placed in the back line to disrupt those. I also think Staghorn is struggling right now because, as I kind of talked about with Molten Lion is one of those familiars that a lot of people, if they pulled, they invested all of their resources into him and just dump him onto the battlefield. And while he is, definitely really powerful, he does have an ability where, if he is 5-star potentially, and he's leveled up and he has 150 gummies in him, very similar to the Hippocampuses, right, that are that way. He's just going to obliterate whatever's in front of him. And having the elemental advantage is just going to kill Staghorn even faster. And considering most people don't have their Staghorns built up yet, right, they aren't going to be able to reliably counter the Molten Lions at all. So while they may be good and while they may potentially counter Hippocampuses in the future, right now it's going to be really easy for potentially a Molten Lion or maybe even a leveled up Might, because I have all my resources poured into Might, to take on a Staghorn and kill them very quickly. And it would be very easy for a unexperienced player to have their Staghorn drag an opponent's enemy into their backline and kill them. So for a lot of players, honestly, Ebony Torex right now as a tank is probably better for you. Or again, Molten Lion if you happen to dump a lot of resources into him. Molten Lion, again, has the ability to become immortal for 7 seconds when his HP is at 10%. It's going to increase his attack speed by 25% and basic attack damage by 50%. Again, I'm only ranking him 2-star, and I think a lot of people are probably going to come to this video, and they're probably going to be like, my Molten Lion is amazing. Yes, your Molten Lion is amazing right now because you have invested heavily into him. He is probably one of your strongest familiars, and we're at a point right now in the game where you can't have you know, 10 familiars at max level and kind of sort your formation based on who you're fighting, right? Your only formation is going to be your strongest familiars that you put in. So for a lot of people who are running Molten Lion, yes, your Molten Lion is probably really powerful right now and you're probably dealing a lot of damage with him. But he, in the long run, is not going to be the highest rated familiar because Hippocampus and Suryu are going to be the meta. We are going to have water meta for quite a while. And he is going to get kind of obliterated by that, right? So I don't think Molten Lion is going to be the answer. A lot of people are also running Ebony Torex, so he's not going to get the advantage on Ebony Torex. Pretty much your only hope for Molten Lion is that your opponent is running Staghorn or potentially Ouroboros, and in that situation, you know, you're probably running like an elemental advantage against your opponent anyway, so you are probably going to win. Hippocampus is going to be meta for quite a while, particularly with Suryu and Crowhawk. A lot of players may choose to run Crowhawk with Hippocampus. I wouldn't really. But if you are leveling up your Crowhawk, which you should be for your elemental formations, he may find his way into a formation with Hippocampus just because the combination of Suryu and Crowhawk, they both land Frostbite on the opponent, and Hippocampus deals increased damage to frostbitten enemies by 25%. You will find a situation where Hippocampus is constantly dealing enhanced damage, and if you consider the fact that a lot of players pulled Hippocampus on the first banner, right, because it was the first banner, right? So everybody's dumping their resources to get him. They are building their formations up. So it's one of those situations where he's just going to be exceptionally powerful. Add on to the fact that he's a ranged unit, that we have Ebony Torex to tank on the front lines, that there is a lot of people that are going to easily be countered with Molten Lion or Might in their formation that are just going to die. People who don't use Staghorn correctly, right? There is so many things that just go wrong against Hippocampus formations right now that he's going to be dominant for a while, and you are going to see him and Suryu dominate. And even with a, you know, potentially really powerful Ouroboros, you're still going to run into situations where Ebony Torex is going to be tanking you, and that Ouroboros is not going to be doing the damage that it needs to do. So it's just one of those situations where you're just going to have to deal with the Hippocampuses. And heaven forbid your opponent also has a bunny bot, because being able to shield your familiars from damage is exceptionally powerful. And while there are a lot of Ebony Torexes out there right now, and they are going to have the elemental advantage, it's going to be, again, one of those situations where they're not a damage type based familiar, right? And Bunny Bot is likely going to not be run in the, maybe they would be run in the front two rows, but I would imagine it would be set in the third back row, because you would probably have Suryu and Hippocampus in the back, that Bunny Bot in the back, and then he runs forward with your melee and your tank up front. So it's one of those situations where Bunny Bot may not even be directly engaging with Ebony Torex. So you're just, I mean, you're just going to destroy if you have Bunny Bot. The reality is, if you have Bunny Bot, if you have Hippocampus for a long time, you are going to be exceptionally powerful. And I think it's also important to note here that you don't necessarily need to put resources into your Bunny Bot, right? So a lot of people who are running Bunny Bot, you don't need to invest in Bunny Bot. You could invest, you actually want to invest in your potentially DPS familiars, right? Because Bunny Bot's going to shield them. And Bunny Bot's usually not going to survive long enough to get 2 of the shields off. If they are, you probably have a relatively strong formation, or you're lacking damage to kill your opponent's formation, or you're already winning. So even just having a level 1 Bunny Bot in order to get the shield off is going to be more powerful than potentially other support-based familiars. So Bunny Bot is very powerful even at level 1. If you do have him at level 1, don't invest in him, invest in your other familiars to kind of universally bring your familiar attack party team up a little bit more. Arachnus is going to be the last familiar that we talk about for the Legendary Plus category. Arachnus is an interesting unit. 297% of attack as AoE damage to enemies, increased targets damage taken by 20% for 6 seconds. Now, we do want to kind of gauge how powerful this ability is, right? And I think the best way to do that is to compare to another familiar. So we're going to compare Arachnus to Draggle. Now, if I know this seems a little bit ridiculous, and people are like, why are you comparing her to Draggle? Because most people are going to have an Awakened 10 Draggle. And Draggle deals 384% of attack as AoE damage to the enemies, and he burns them for an additional 100% of attack as damage for 5 seconds, with a very low CD on his ability. So while Arachnus does increase the damage dealt to opposing familiars, a lot of times we already have a familiar like Draggle, right, who we're going to be investing in because we do want to have those elemental bonuses on our specific elemental comps right now. A lot of times Draggle might actually be in a better situation than Arachnus herself. Now, maybe some people are out there and they've invested in Arachnus because Arachnus is a very powerful PvP-based familiar, right? So maybe people have invested in her and they are going to use her in their compositions by just the result of the fact that a lot of resources have been dumped into her. I don't think as a whole she's going to turn out to be very powerful in the long run. And you have to consider as well, there are a couple of formations right now where she may be really powerful, whether it is landing an AoE attack after you potentially draw opponents in with either Staghorn or with Hippocampus. But for the most part, she is not going to be the monster that you kind of think she is. She's going to be pretty good, I would say, in the quote-unquote kitchen knife formation, where you just run 5 DPS and just charge them into your opponent. But outside of that, I don't see her being kind of this god tier based familiar arena unit. And again, most people are running Ebony Torex, and you're just going to run Ebony Torex anyway. So, I mean, to me, Ebony Torex would probably be better than her because he's going to survive longer, deal more damage because of his survival, and he's going to be able to kind of disrupt enemy formation. So I don't think Arachnus is going to be the best. I could be wrong, but most of the information that I pulled from the CN and Taiwanese-based forums, and this was an older post, so it's based off of when kind of these units all first came out and when the game launched, does kind of indicate to me that she will not be dominant. Just a quick note on the PvP-based familiars, the light-based familiar, the crab light-based familiar doesn't seem to get much play. Very similar with, I believe it's Miru, the dark-based familiar. My understanding is while he is really good, you're probably not going to be able to max awaken him anytime soon, and so his impact on the game and in PvP will be a little bit marginal. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I will be making separate videos covering all of the 4 stars and the 3 stars. I do want to dive in a little bit deep, kind of like I did in this video. So they will be a little bit longer videos, and hopefully you guys like that. And I am planning on doing a deck building video here in the near future because a lot of people have been asking for that. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please hit the subscribe button. I am new to making Kuni content, and I would really appreciate it. And I will catch you guys next time.